Hello and welcome to Religion and Life. I'm your host, Ozzy Ostwald. Religious art has been important to the church for over 2,000 years. And one of the most famous styles of religious art is fresco painting. Da Vinci painted the Last Supper in this style. And here in the High Country, we have several examples of fresco paintings by a famous artist, Ben Long. Today, we're at Rumple Memorial Presbyterian Church, which has recently installed two of Ben Long's paintings, the 23rd Psalm and the Good Shepherd. My guest today is the Reverend Dr. Kathy Beach. You are the senior minister here, and you're going to talk about these wonderful works of art today, aren't you?
I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, I know you got to be really proud to have this addition to your church.
It's been a wonderful addition to the church's ministry, and we really hope that it's a way that we can outreach to the community. We know fewer and fewer people actually enter sanctuaries these days, and this is a way that we can engage people who might not come into the sanctuary for worship, but would want to come and see these paintings and encounter biblical art.
That might be something we want to talk about, the fact that fewer and fewer people, but let's talk about the art first. Introduce yourself. You've been here for, did you tell me, 7 years?
I came to Rumple in the beginning of March of 2017. I came here from Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm a native of New York State, but all of my ordained ministry has been in the state of North Carolina. I've just sort of crisscrossed back and forth across the state. I was ordained in Wilmington, then served a church in the Charlotte area, back east, and then came here to Blowing Rock in 2017.
We're really happy to have you here.
Well,
I hope you love the mountains enough to stay for a long time.
We love it in the High Country. Yeah.
And this church now that you find yourself in, Rumple Memorial, is a pretty historic church here in Blowing Rock. It might have been the first church established in Blowing Rock. I know it was among the earliest.
It was definitely among the earliest. I'm not sure if St. Mary or Rumple were established first, but it was in 1886.
1886, yeah.
It's named for Dr. Jethro Rumple, who was one of the first preachers here. He was actually a pastor in Salisbury, but his family had a home up here. One of those homes is just right, like on the other side of the Bronx.
Still standing?
Still standing. The Spring Haven Inn was a home for he and his family, and was a place where Ben Long stayed in the summer when he was up here in the area painting.
Well, that's quite a coincidence, I guess.
It's just like a stone's throw from the church.
Now, this current structure is not the original structure, is that correct?
No, like so many early churches, the original sanctuary burned. So the sanctuary that exists now was completed in 1912, but it was started in 1906. The members were determined not to borrow any money, and they wanted to build a beautiful stone church that reflected the mountains. So the story is that the stones all come from area farms.
Really?
People brought them. They would bring them week after week, and they built the sanctuary slowly.
Well, it is beautiful. It is gorgeous, and I'd like to know how many stones are.
I've never counted.
Yeah,
the
okay.
stones, but there's also horsehair in the walls.
Really, on purpose?
Yes,
purpose?
That's how they used to help to bind the mortar. Was they added horsehair to it, so that we have 13-year-old horsehair in the walls.
That's really interesting. It's a long history and a beautiful church right here on Main Street in Blowing Rock. Now, most recently, though, you've started a new, you call it the Fresco ministry.
Fresco ministry. Yes.
And you were able to acquire a couple of, one of them's behind us here. This is the 23rd Psalm in 2022, I believe.
That's correct. So we had a dedication just a few weeks ago, and in that dedication, my sermon, which I wish I had ended with the way I began, but I said it all began with a dream. We were in the process of renovating the space where we're sitting right now. This used to be church offices, so there would have been nowhere for us to put large fresco paintings like this. We have a member who was a part of an organization that had a Ben Long fresco. He said he had a dream that Rumple needed frescoes from Ben Long. And we said, well, we don't even know if Ben Long's still painting frescoes. We weren't sure that we could pay to acquire them because we were already doing these renovations. And about 3 months later, a gentleman called and said, would Rumple be interested in Ben Long frescoes? And of course, because we'd had this other conversation about this dream, I engaged him in a conversation, and he told us that these frescoes that are here were in this former hospice facility in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, that people weren't using the space anymore. they were sort of lost and hidden. And he even heard that they might were thinking of painting over them.
Oh my goodness.
Which we could not believe. And so he got us in contact with the hospice. The church leadership here said, explore it. Let's see if we've got a space where we could put them up and we could have a whole new ministry for the church. Let's find out. And so negotiations began, and the hospice facility that owned the group that owned the hospice facility at that point was happy to sell them because they weren't being appreciated.
Right.
And the family that originally commissioned them has connections to North Carolina, and they were Presbyterians, and so there were just all these pieces that came together. And then, like I said, Ben Long his grandparents used to live here. He used to spend summers here and even more extended time in Blowing Rock. And so he was thrilled that his paintings could come closer to where many of the others are on the Fresco Trail.
Right.
And it all just came.
It's kind of serendipitous almost.
It feels very much
Okay.
like so many pieces, and we were able to raise the money to buy them without any trouble, because once people in the congregation heard about this amazing opportunity, they responded really quickly.
Well, I want to talk about the paintings in a moment, but who is Ben Long? Let's talk about Ben Long.
Yeah,
I mean, I know who he is. He grew
Yeah.
up in my hometown of Statesville, but tell us a little bit about the artist
Well,
here.
I can tell you a little bit about him.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not an expert on Ben Long, but he grew up in Statesville, North Carolina, graduated from Chapel Hill, served in Vietnam, and had his grandfather, the people who lived here in Blowing Rock, was also a painter and a preacher. I don't know if you know that about Ben Long.
I didn't know that, yeah.
He was a fairly well-known artist, his grandfather was.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Italy in the 70s, yes, and learned the art of fresco painting from the masters.
Ben Long,
Ben
not the
Long
grandfather.
did.
Yeah,
Not the grandfather, sorry, Ben.
Yeah.
Went to Italy in 1970s and learned from the masters how to do fresco painting. And then came back here to the United States, and you probably know, I don't know if everybody who's listening to this knows, that he came to a little church in Ashe County and met the priest, the story goes, at some kind of social event,
Yeah.
and said, "Can I paint a fresco in your church?" And the priest said, "Sure," and then later on went to somebody and said, "What's a fresco?" Like he didn't know what he'd agreed to do. And, so he's a North Carolina native. Most of his frescoes are in North Carolina, although there are some in some other places. And now we have these ones here close to many of the others that are a part of the Ben Long Fresco Trail.
Yeah, so two of the ones, and you mentioned this in Ashe County, St. Mary's, I think it's called the Mystery of Faith, and then Holy Trinity, which is maybe the best known Ben Long fresco of the Last Supper, reinterpretation of the Last Supper. So now Blowing Rock can lay claim to its own frescoes by Ben Long. Now, let's talk about the process of creating a fresco. I know a little bit about it, and I know you mentioned Ben Long was one of the few people outside of Italy to actually create frescoes in Italy, and he also won a prestigious award named after Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah. And the only non-Italian to ever win that award.
That's pretty impressive. So since the rector at the Episcopal Church didn't know what he had agreed to and didn't know what a fresco was, maybe you can help us. What is a fresco?
I've learned a lot about frescoes in the last 2.5 years. So fresco, the name comes from the Italian, which means fresh, because you paint on fresh plaster. So the paint is applied. It's a special kind of paint. I can't tell you exactly all the details about it, but there's a special kind of paint that goes into fresco painting, and you apply it onto fresh plaster. Most frescoes, ours are different because this is in a frame and mounted on the wall. Most of the frescoes that Ben has painted are painted actually on the wall. The plaster is applied to the wall of the whatever building, and that's true for the ones in Ashe County. And then the paint goes on top of the plaster. So there are multiple phases that happen before you get to this. The artist designs all of the characters and tests the colors out. Those black and white drawings are called cartoons, actually, which I think is kind of interesting. And he does them to scale and then tests out all of the colors. And then a painting this size, this is 8 feet by 15 feet.
It's huge.
Takes a long time to paint, and because it's all fresh paint on plaster, you can only paint a section at a time so that the plaster doesn't dry before you put the paint on it. So the artist, Ben, knows how much he can probably accomplish in a day with a team of people who work with him. And so I can't show you exactly where these are, but there are plaster lines that a trained eye can find in a fresco to see when a day was complete and the next day began.
That's really interesting. It's just labor intensive. You're applying plaster, you're painting quickly, so you have to get it before it dries. And you were telling me that since this is a little bit different, it's not attached to the wall, but it's in a frame. He built a concrete wall behind and then put the mesh and the plaster on top of that.
And there is usually mesh behind the plaster on a normal fresco, but this has plaster, mesh, and then a cement, like sort of reinforcement behind it as well.
So it's got to weigh a few pounds.
This one weighs about 3,000 pounds. The fine art company that stored it for us in Charlotte, in between when it was taken off of the wall, they were both taken off the walls in Mount Pleasant and brought here, they had some kind of machine where they could weigh it. 3,000.
A ton and a half.
Yeah.
What about the other one, the smaller one?
I think that one only weighs like 800 pounds.
Only 800 pounds, okay. So you were saying that you had to do a little bit of structural engineering in the church to support the weight of these paintings. I can imagine that would have been a challenge.
Additional cement in the walls and some other reinforcements to make sure that, and lots of studies were done by a structural engineer to make sure that that we could handle the weight.
Do you have any idea how long it took him to complete these paintings?
I don't know. That's one thing I don't know. And I don't know exactly, like if it was this size to say how long, that's beyond my fresco knowledge.
Yeah, okay. Well, the two that you have here, the 23rd Psalm, which is behind us, and the smaller one across the room there, the Good Shepherd. And, of course, a shepherd figures prominently in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? Yep. So you gave me a secret about this earlier. You said that originally the two kind of went together. You want to tell me about that story?
The story that Ben Long tells. So he was commissioned to do this, it was a fresco, by a woman whose grandson was working at this hospice facility in Mount Pleasant. And he says that he ran out of room, that originally the Good Shepherd was supposed to be somewhere in this 23rd Psalm, because, as you said, the Lord is my shepherd is how the psalm begins, but he ran out of space in his design, and so he ended up with a second fresco. And
good for you, because now you have two.
Yeah, now we have two.
All right.
Well, so they faced each other in a much smaller space in Mount Pleasant.
Well, let's look at this for a moment, because this is really intriguing. There's so much here, and we're not going to get to talk about all of it, but you had said earlier that some people will come and look at this and say, I don't see the 23rd Psalm here, at least not initially. But then you begin to see some elements that are from that very famous psalm. You want to point out a couple of things that might you might not recognize at first glance.
Well, there's water here in the front, sort of close to where you look, and the psalm talks about resting or being by still water, and so there's a gentleman there resting by the water. At the end, near the end of the psalm, there's a line about a cup overflowing, and so the woman that's here farthest to my right, you can see an overflowing cup that she's holding. There's a table there. The psalm refers to preparing a table in the presence of my enemies. There's not anyone there at the table, but there is a table present. Let's see. Some people think that this gentleman, sort of prominent towards the front, is representing someone whose soul is being restored, which is one of the lines from the psalm as well.
Well, I have to admit that if I were to envision the 23rd Psalm, a nude man sitting in a lotus position, meditating with the bun is not what I would not what I would think might be there, and it's arresting when you first see it.
It's definitely stunning.
So it brings in a kind of yoga, Hindu, Buddhist element into the painting. I mean, I don't think you can see that any other way.
Although the interesting thing I would tell you is that some people have come here and seen it and asked if that's Jesus.
Ah, okay, well, and I guess that's the beauty of...
That's not what I've seen, but other people have wondered about that.
Well, and I guess that's the beauty of art like this. It opens up so many different possibilities for interpretation, and the artist Ben Long is very reluctant to say what anything means,
Very reluctant.
because he doesn't.
We pressed him.
Yeah, well, good for him.
And he says, "What do you see?" That's what when people
Well,
say,
that's
"What's this?" And he'll
that's
say,
what.
What do you think it is?
Exactly, that's what art is for, right? So this woman in the middle, or toward the middle of the painting, she caught my attention, and we talked a little bit about it, and we don't know, but I thought Mary and the baby Jesus when I first saw it, but could be, but who knows?
Could definitely be.
Of course, Mary and the baby Jesus weren't around when the psalm was written.
But there's definitely.
But there is the kind of Davidic connection to the Messiah and so forth. So anyway, and then these figures off in the distance, ghost-like.
Yeah, that's the only part that Ben has ever told us a little bit about, which is that dark part. The psalm talks about the darkest valley, or some translations will say, death. Even that dark space is looking towards that, and then you can see even past them above. There's lighter figures, and so that maybe is looking towards darkness or death, and then eternal life, or maybe new life in the figures above.
Yeah, and then
higher towards like heaven.
Right.
You can imagine heaven being somewhere above.
And then just pointing out a few other things that I wouldn't want to hazard a guess about, but there's this kind of grandmotherly figure with the little girl over here. They're obviously having an intimate kind of moment, and the 5 women, curious, and then the young man looking off into the. So there's so much going on in this painting, and I could imagine that I could come here every week and sit here and think about it.
See something new.
See something new. Yeah, I keep seeing things new as I look at it. So that's the 23rd Psalm, and then the Good Shepherd across the room. Very interesting. I think we can probably get an image superimposed on it while we talk about it here. But most prominently, of course, is a painting of a shepherd with the shepherd's staff, and there are 4 sheep in the background. But the interesting thing is he's mesmerized by this dandelion, which is blowing in the breeze. You want to tell me what that's all about?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I couldn't get Ben to tell us. Some people have wondered if the sort of blowing of those little, the former flower petals of the dandelion is the Holy Spirit sort of being dispersed into There's other people that have wondered if maybe he's used dandelions other places, so I think it may be something that, like, there's a big rock in this one that's a common thing. Right.
We definitely have a breeze blowing the dandelion, and the Holy Spirit is associated with the air and the wind. So I would say that's probably a legitimate way to look at that. What really struck me about this, and the fact that it goes with this painting, at least originally, is that the shepherd's face is really peaceful and content. And the 23rd Psalm is one that often gets read at funerals, so we tend to associate it with death, but it's really about assurance and peace. So that's kind of the thing that stuck out to me about the Good Shepherd.
That's part of the message that we have continued to try to communicate. We have a video. If folks come to see the frescoes, we've made a video that they can watch here. And that's exactly what the video mentions. Often people think of this psalm when they're thinking about death or a funeral, but it really is about the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And I think his countenance is so peaceful and calm and almost reassuring, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful poetry, the psalm, and now you have these beautiful artworks. All right, so how did you acquire the frescoes? I mean, I know you said that somebody had a dream and somebody else, but then you had, I'm sure you had to go through months-long negotiations.
There was all kinds of negotiation. There were legal aspects of it, insurance aspects, as you might imagine. But the negotiation happened with this hospice facility, and they were willing to sell it, and we were able to get all the legal documents in consultation with Ben Long. He was involved in that even from the early time, and some of his family members. And so we paid the hospice for the Frescos, and then arranged to have a moving company. We found there's a fine art company that has an office in Charlotte. There, it's an international company. And they knew of a machinery moving company who was willing to take the job on of moving these things.
That must have been quite the responsibility. I mean,
Yes.
3,000 pounds, what did you say, 18 by what?
15 by 8.
15 by 8 feet in length. And so the question becomes, where's the door that you brought it in, right? Because that's a huge,
Yes.
how did you get it in
The
here?
door was behind us here, which
Okay.
that's now been covered with the wall. There were 2 windows there, and the contractor who helped us, the contractor who's done the renovation here, who's a church member, we were trying to figure it out because from the street, there's no way in because you can't bend or turn these Frescos,
Right.
right?
No,
So one of the possibilities was to take out a stained glass window that's over there and then come through, which that wasn't a very
That didn't
good
sound quite
idea.
right.
So he said, what if we turn this double window into a door, and then they come on the street, lift the Fresco up with a crane, and bring it through the space? And that's what we did.
I bet you were nervous when all that was going on.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
I actually couldn't stay. Some of the members of our Fresco ministry team were here watching for most of the time. I came for about an hour or so, and I was very nervous.
You couldn't take it.
There's no way that
Yeah.
the company, the machinery moving company, they were remarkable, and the fine art people, they were amazing.
There's still scars on the building outside.
Yes,
Right.
it'll eventually be covered over, but if you drive down Jenny Stevens Lane, you can see where we brought the paintings through
Yeah.
the wall.
Wow. So if you acquired this in 2002, they're here now, you must have spent, well, more than half of your time here as minister working on this Fresco project.
Well, yeah, it's been 2.5 years of
Yeah. So it's
8
quite
years,
a
yeah.
leadership responsibility. So
It wasn't something that I ever imagined that I would do.
yeah, I'm sure.
But there's great leadership in the church, and there was such good energy for this ministry from the beginning and like you said earlier, I mean, it's just remarkable how all of the pieces fell into place. And this fine art moving company in Charlotte was gracious to store them for us until we were ready, because we removed them in October of 2022, but we didn't move them in until December of 2024. So they were in
Okay.
storage for 2 years.
Do you have to have any sort of special climate control in here to preserve
We
them?
don't. That's one of the other amazing things about Frescos.
Ah,
Is they
they're very durable,
endure
right?
for centuries.
Well, for
much
centuries, that's
longer,
right, yeah.
And you can even have them outside. And they're
Really?
okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah. So we don't have to do anything special in here.
So you mentioned that this is a way to get people into the church. Are people coming to see them? And do
Yes.
they come up the mountain with the intent of seeing them? So it's not just locals who are coming around and viewing them?
We've only been open, as you and I are talking, for 2 weekends. Right now, the Frescos.
Oh, I didn't know it was that,
The
really?
Frescos are open Friday, Saturday from 10 to 4, and then Sunday afternoons from 1 to 4 right now. We're
Okay.
hoping to expand those hours in the summer. It'll probably be more, but for now, we wanted to start small and slow and just see. And we've had people come, local people from other places. We have our first tour group coming in a few weeks. There's 47 people coming in that tour group to see the Frescos at
Oh,
one
really?
time. So, and we anticipate that kind of thing will happen more and more because there is a Fresco trail up here, but these Frescos haven't been on them before. So
Right.
even folks who've come to see the ones in Ashe County or Morganton, or they haven't seen these because they've been in this hospice facility where nobody saw them for many years. So,
Right.
we anticipate more and more groups like that coming from far away.
That's really nice that people can come to Blowing Rock and see these Frescos, hop over to Ashe County and see some. I think there's one down in Crossnor,
There's one, yep.
and I'm not sure where else up
There's
here,
one
but
in
yeah.
Montreat. I mean, there's one in Morganton. Those are a little bit further away. But,
Yeah, but at least 5 that you
Yeah,
could
they're
do
close
within a day, right here. And
the
of course,
other thing that we're working on, already in conversation about. So we have an art and history museum across the street, so people come to see art there. And then there's also a beautiful Elliot Dangerfield painting in the sanctuary of St. Mary Episcopal across the street from us.
Okay.
So we're trying to encourage and invite people to experience art in
You've got
this
an
part of South
art
Main
crawl
Street
going on
in
here.
Walnut. Yeah.
Well, your sanctuary itself is a work of art. It's beautiful, some beautiful stained glass. I noticed the stained glass behind the altar and behind the choir loft is in honor of the founder, Dr. Rumple. So that's been there for how long? I mean, that must have been early on.
That wasn't put in originally when the sanctuary was completed in 1912, because they didn't name, this was originally the Blowing Rock Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
Until the 1920s. And then they named it for Dr. Rumple, and that Bible window for Dr. Rumple was put in around the time that the church was named for him.
Did he get to see this church? No. Okay, so he passed away before this church was built. Well, it's a beautiful sanctuary inside and out, and you've done a really marvelous job of keeping it like it was. Sometimes when churches grow and they have additions, it just doesn't work together, but this is beautiful here. Beautiful job.
Well, there's been, the same contractor who's a church member has done a lot of the work and renovation over time, and it's just been remarkable.
And how many members do you have here?
We full-time members, I think, on about 350, and then we have another 100 or so people who we call affiliate members, who are people whose Blowing Rock may not be their full-time home, but their part-time home, and they have officially connected themselves to us. So there's a good 100 others of those folks who are here. Sometimes they're just here weekends, sometimes they're here 6 months out of the year. So they're all different.
Yeah, Blowing Rock has that character about it, as does Boone now, but
more and more.
Definitely a seasonal population. So we've got about a minute left, and I want to just ask you before we leave. You mentioned earlier that fewer and fewer people are coming into the sanctuary of the church, and this is one of the reasons something like this is so important. There's been a lot written about this younger generation, I guess we're Generation Z now, not really going to church. Does this concern, obviously I guess it concerns you, but what do you think the future is here?
Well, I think that's a great question that I can't predict. But I think the invitation to churches today is to engage in, I would consider this creative, right? I don't know that if 15 years ago you'd come to the leadership of the Rumple Church in Blowing Rock and said, hey, in 15 years y'all are going to have these huge art paintings in this space where people can gather. Nobody would have said that.
Right.
So, but I am grateful that the leadership of this church embraced this opportunity and said, this is an incredible opportunity for us.
Right.
And so I think the future of church involves different kinds of things like this. This is a way to invite people in. They experience the art. This is biblical art, and so they might not know it's still new, so everything's not finished in here. But eventually, there will be copies of some translations of the 23rd Psalm on the wall in here,
nice.
so that when people come, they can see it. Some of it's read in the video that people, when they come that they see. And so I think we don't even know all of the possibilities that could be here for us in the future.
Well, isn't that kind of the history of religious art? In the churches, people came to see it, the pilgrimages and so forth.
And that's what Ken says in the video, that the frescoes and other art were the poor folks' Bible. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, that's it for this week on Religion and Life, and I hope you'll join us again next week on App TV as we continue to explore the relationship between religion, culture, and society. Until then, this is Ozzy Ostwald.